Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Leah with Tidewater Science Institute, and we've got Mary Patterson here joining us from Truckee, California. Hi, Mary. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited. Mary is a botanist for the Tahoe National Forest. So today she's going to talk to us about rare plant monitoring and what a botanist does and how that role is related to land management. And we're so excited to hear from her in just a minute. But we have a couple other exciting things to share before we get into her talk. So if you're a regular watcher of Lunch with a Scientist, you know that this series is designed to share science careers with the public and with young people. And right now we are preparing for our fall research program, which is another way that we share professional scientists' work with young people. So if you're watching and you have kids or grandkids or you're a high school student, keep in mind this is a great upcoming research program beginning in September. We've got two tracks, one focused on environmental science, led by our program director, Spencer Usden, and you get to pair one-on-one with a professional scientist and create some awesome research, as I'm sure Mary can speak to that she's done in her science career as well. And then the second focus is on learning the program R. You get to practice data analysis and coding, and it's such a great opportunity, something awesome to add to your college application. And if you want to sign up, there's some information here at the URL, headwaterscienceinstitute.org/science-camp is where you can see all our camps. So now that that is out of the way, before we get into Mary's super awesome talk, I just want to thank Brendan Madigan from Alpenglow Sports for sponsoring us today. If you don't know it, Alpenglow is an awesome little mountain shop in Tahoe City, California. It's been around since 1979. Lots of gear for climbing, skiing, hiking, and what have you. So thank you, Brendan. We really appreciate it. With all that said, let's give the floor to Mary. Mary is, as I said, a botanist for the Tahoe National Forest, and she's been working with the Forest Service since 2017. Prior to that, she worked as a botanist for the Bureau of Land Management, the county, and the private sector. She's got a bachelor's degree in biology and environmental studies and a master's in plant biology and conservation, and is here to tell us all about rare plant species. Take it away, Mary.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And I want to add that from a young age, I've had a passion and enthusiasm for outdoors and nature. And so being a botanist is a career path that really allowed me to extend that passion into my career. So I get to spend a majority of my time outside in nature, hiking around in beautiful spots and looking at really cool plants. So today I'm going to first start off with sharing a little bit about my job, and then I'm going to go into a specific rare plant monitoring project that I've done on the Tahoe for Hutchinson's Lewisia. So my job has really two program areas. It has invasive plants and rare plants. And my job is to be an advisor to the decision maker for the forest. And so the decision maker is either the district ranger or the forest supervisor. And I am advising them on either how to minimize the threat of invasive plants or how to protect and manage rare plants. So invasive plants, I do a lot of treatment or prevention of the spread of invasive plants. Here we are, here's my crew this year out at the Boca area treating musk thistle. And invasive species are really important in the botany world because they can cause a loss of habitat for plants and wildlife. They can increase fire risk, they can increase erosion, or they can just cause economic loss. So some invasive plants that we have on the Tahoe National Forest are skeleton weed, musk thistle, fennel, yellow star thistle, spotted knapweed, tall white top, Scotch broom, and cheatgrass. For rare plants, my goal is to minimize and protect rare plants from a loss of viability. So in order to do this, I survey suitable habitat that's within proposed project areas. And then if I find any rare plants, I provide management recommendations on how to best protect them. So rare plants, where the big questions always are, where are the rare plants and why are some plants rare? And moving forward, I'm going to use this key term endemic. And endemic means that a plant is native and restricted to a particular place. So to first understand rarity, you got to understand biodiversity. And these maps are from the Biota of North America program. And they do a really great job of depicting how biodiversity is not evenly distributed across the United States. This first map on the left is a density gradient of native species across the United States, with the blue and the green being the greatest density of species. So you can see, if you look at California, you can see that there's a lot of biodiversity within California as a whole, and specifically in northern Sierra Nevada mountains and the Cascades, and then also a little bit on the central coast. The map on the right is a density gradient of endemic species. So this is species that have a limited geographical distribution. And we have high concentrations of endemic species in the United States around the tropical parts of the country. So Florida, the southern part of Texas, and then in the Mediterranean climate of California. And then specifically in California, there's a lot of endemic species around LA and San Diego, which also have huge population centers. So California is a very special place for plants. In the state of California, there's over 6,000 native species, of which over a quarter are endemic to the state of California. And that arises the question of why. And a lot of this can be attributed to the Mediterranean-like climate of California, coupled with the diversity of topography. California spans from the coastal areas to high mountaintops of the Sierras. Its climate is relatively stable with that Mediterranean type of system. California has a diversity of soils and has a diversity of geological processes. So there's parts of the state that have never been glaciated. There's parts of the states that have glacial activity. So all of that diversity has led to a lot of evolutionary action that has allowed for a lot of speciation to occur. So there's a lot of plants in California. So what makes some of these plants rare? And that can be attributed to limited range in the species. So some species are only found in specific river drainages or on the top of a specific mountain. Some plants have extremely specialized habitat, like vernal pools or serpentine soils. And then some species have become rare due to a loss of habitat, either through development or invasive species or some other type of loss of habitat. And in California, California ranks its plants further based on their rarity through this California Rare Plant Rank Index. So there's there's a scale of rarity within rare plants of California. So now I'm going to go over some of the habitat types that are on the Tahoe National Forest and some examples of rare plants that are found with those habitats. So serpentine. Serpentine is the state rock of California, and it has a really high concentration of heavy metals, which makes for very hostile growing conditions. So the plants that have evolved to tolerate these conditions are very specialized to this type of soil. And further, this habitat type is very fragmented and is threatened by invasive species in development. So some examples of rare plants, we have Van Zook's morning glory, which is only found in the Forest Hill area. And then Lane's butterweed is only found in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas around the Sacramento area. Cliff habitats. Rare plants that are found in cliff habitats often have extremely limited geographic ranges, which is the case of these two examples. True's mountain jewel flower was recently described in, I believe, 2017, and it is only known from 3 locations around Nevada City. Then Cantaloupe's Lewisia is only found in the Yuba and Feather River drainages. Alpine and subalpine habitat, kind of moving up the forest to closer to Truckee and Tahoe. We have white bark pine, which is actually fairly widespread across the United States, the western part of the United States. But this species is under decline because of blister rust, which is a non-native pathogen that is killing off this species. Another rare plant in the subalpine is Austin's milk vetch, which is endemic to the high peaks around Tahoe. Riparian habitats, you might find a moonwort or grape ferns. These little ferns are incredibly small. They're about the size of your thumb. And then an old growth habitat, a rare plant we have is the clustered lady slipper, which is a type of orchid. And orchids require fungal associates to grow. So they have a pretty complex growing system. And both riparian areas and old growth habitats are threatened by catastrophic wildfires that are as a result of increased fuel loading. One really cool habitat that we have on the Tahoe is fens. And fens are a special type of wetland that are characterized by 40 centimeters of peat. And peat is a type of organic soil that accumulates at a very slow rate. So it can, for 11 to 41 centimeters of peat, that can take over 1,000 years to accumulate. So if you ever find yourself in a fen system, you'll know that that system has been there for thousands of years. And fens are very sensitive to changes in hydrology. So some rare plants that are in these habitats are the mud sedge and then the California pitcher plant. The California pitcher plant is a carnivorous plant, and it traps insects in this modified leaf structure that's pictured here. Tahoe yellowcrest is endemic to the sandy beaches of Lake Tahoe and is primarily threatened by beach recreation. And then Plumas ivesea is found in vernal pools of the eastern Sierras. And then barren and rock outcrops, I think this might be my favorite habitat type. We have Howell's tausia, which is found in scree fields on really steep, loose, rocky habitats. And then starved daisy, which is only found around the Donner Summit area and grows in the large granitic outcrops that's so prevalent around Donner Summit. So now I'm going to talk about a long-term monitoring program of Hutchinson's Lewisia that I set up in 2017. Hutchinson's Lewisia is a perennial that grows on gravelly ridge tops and is endemic to California. It blooms for 1 to 2 weeks after the snow melts, and then the entire plant disappears. So you really have to be at the right place at the right time in order to see this plant. The primary threat to this species is OHV use. So in developing a monitoring protocol for this species, I set out to answer 2 questions. My first goal was to create a system that's repeatable to allow us to gain a trend for this species. So prior to this protocol, the species was being monitored at different times of the year. And so, like I said, after it blooms, it disappears. So if you're even like a week late to go to monitor the species, you're not going to find this plant. And then my second question was to figure out how management activities are impacting this species. So it was identified that these occurrences of rare plants have disturbances of people driving over them. As this habitat type that's very open and often pretty flat is very inviting to drive across or to park your vehicle on. So this threat was identified as a potential threat, but we didn't have any data supporting whether it was actually impacting the species or not. So in 2017, we set up 100 plots over 7 sites on the Tahoe National Forest. We used a plot and transect method. And so due to this specific habitat type of the species, transects were subjectively placed and then plots were systematically placed every 5 meters along the transect. And the transect lengths varied based on the habitat type, but ranged from 20 meters to 100 meters. We marked the ends of the transect with rebar and GPS them so we could find them again in the future. And then each plot was marked with a whisk and a metal number tag. Then in each square meter plot, we counted every single individual Lewisia that was in that plot. And then we also measured the closest evidence of OHV disturbance. So whether that was a tire track or a motorized trail or road. So from our preliminary measurements in 2017, we were able to gain baseline data for this species. And then we remeasured these occurrences in 2020, but I haven't finished analyzing the data for that. And then for the second question of how forest management activities are impacting these species, we found that there was a significant difference in the density of Lewisia that were within 20 meters of OHV disturbance and then further away from OHV disturbance. So plants that were less than 20 meters from the nearest OHV disturbance had a significantly lower density level than the plots that were further away from the OHV disturbance. So some limitations I want to highlight with this monitoring is that we have a pretty small sample size. And as you learn with statistics, the larger the sample size, the better that is for your statistical analysis. But with rare plants, this is a pretty common thing to have a small sample size. And then our methods were only partially randomized. So our data is can really only tell us trends for our specific sites. So far, this data is already helping drive management decisions. So the picture on the left is what one of our sites looked like in 2017. And this really bare, open area was very inviting to be used as a parking area, dispersed camping. So it's getting very heavily driven over. And so I proposed a project to help better delineate the road and trail for OHVs by placing boulders along the road. So in the fall of 2019, these boulders were placed along the side of the road and are able to help protect this sensitive plant. And then people always ask me what resources I use to help in my plant identification. So these first two books on the left are dichotomous keys. And dichotomous means a division of two. So how these books work is that you have a couplet of two options. And so, for example, it might ask, is the flower white or is the flower yellow? And so if you say the flower is white, and then it will go to another couplet of two options. And you keep going through this key until you get to your species. And then with dichotomous keys, you'll need a hand lens and then a ruler to help look at some of the fine details that they'll ask you. So the Jetson Manual has all the plants in California. If you remember, there's a lot of plants in California, so you can imagine this book is really big and really heavy. So I don't like to bring this book out into the field with me. So instead, I bring Vern Oswald's Selected Plants of Northern California in adjacent Nevada. So this only has plants that are within my area that I work in. Then the third book to the right is Plant Identification Terminology. So this is a dictionary for all the plant terms that are used in the different dichotomous keys. There's a lot of plant terms. I don't know what all of them mean, so it's really nice to have this dictionary. And then the two books on the right are picture books, and they're really great for anyone that's interested in getting into botany. And these books are really good for Nevada and Placer counties, so the areas of the Tahoe National Forest. And they have really good descriptions that will help you determine the differences between similar species. And then I also use the internet a lot. One website that I really like is CalFlora. And there's a lot of really great photos that you can compare your plant with to what people have found in the past. And there's also really good range maps of where plants have been found in the California area. And then another tool I use is a plant press, which is down in the middle, the bottom middle of the slide. So if I find something in the field that I don't want to key out in the field, I'll put it in the plant press and save it for later. Or if I find something new, I want to record that. So I'll make a voucher of that plant, and then I'll send it into an herbarium as a record of what has been found. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mary. That was great. Thank you, Mary. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
It's always wonderful for us to hear from someone in our area. We're based in Soda Springs, so to hear about some of the rare plants in this region is really great. So thank you. That was fascinating. So we had a question come in from Laura here. She's asking, how do you determine if putting in a restoration project is beneficial, especially if an endangered bird species is using an invasive species as a food or shelter source?
Yeah, so with restoration projects, we're looking at the system as a whole. So we have an interdisciplinary team on the Forest Service. We have hydrologists, we have wildlife biologists, and then I speak for the botany. And then we're working together as a team to figure out what is going on with the system, whether it needs restoration, like there might be excessive erosion, or there might be issues with some the habitat of a wildlife species. And then from that, we plan a restoration project to be beneficial. So with invasive species as a food or shelter, that wildlife can definitely use invasive species, but they're not the preferred or like beneficial food or shelter that they evolved with. So we want to create an environment that's going to be further beneficial for that species.
So it sounds like the answer is kind of getting it back to its natural balance.
Yes, yeah.
That makes sense. So a question came up for me while I was listening to you. You gave a couple examples of species that are particularly impacted by humans, such as the Tahoe yellow crest, which you said was threatened by beach recreation, and then of course Hutchinson's Lowigia. Are you looking particularly at species impacted by human presence?
Well, humans are very impactful creatures on our landscape. And traditionally, humans haven't always been the greatest steward of our forest and our environment. So we have a lot of long-lasting impacts that are caused by us. And as being land managers, activities that are caused by humans are something that we can manage and help steer towards a more beneficial outcome.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Thanks. Yeah. And so Spencer Houston is asking, first off, how did you know when the Lowigia was going to bloom? And how do you keep track of all the different plants that you're managing and observing at the same time?
So with Lowigia, I'm looking at our snow data. So using the SNOTEL data from the California snow surveys. So I look at that data and I'm gauging on how quickly that our snowpack is melting through those monthly surveys. And then I also will use daily satellite images for some of the occurrences that aren't near a snow survey site to help gauge what the snowpack is doing in those areas to help time the survey of these species. And then the second question, how do I keep track of all the different plants you need to manage? So in the Forest Service, we have a database that's called the Natural Resource Inventory System, or NRIS. So we enter in all of our occurrences into that database. And then anytime we revisit that occurrence, we'll record it, we'll keep it in that database. And so this database is geographically referenced. So there's a GIS associated and a shapefile associated with all of our data. And then we can go to a site and pull up all the records from past years. We can see where people mapped it in past years, and then any comments or threats that the observers made. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
That's great, thanks.
Yeah.
And so are there many projects that are happening at the same time?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we have we have like large vegetation management projects that are addressing the excess fuel buildup of the forest. And then on top of that, we might also have a restoration project for a meadow or a riparian area or system. And then we might also have a recreation project all on top of the same area to help better delineate some trails if they're not at a sustainable location, and then also to increase recreational opportunities. So we have projects that are proposing new trails also.
That makes sense. And so with the specific project that you touched on, what is the future of preserving Hutchinson's Lowigia?
What is the future? Yeah, so I think getting more projects to help delineate trails will help minimize the impacts to these occurrences. So we've had a number of sites that we have been able to protect through either boulders or trail reroutes, or other ways of helping to delineate a trail to keep people on trail. But there's still sites that are unprotected that need protection.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the very beginning of your talk for some of the students watching, when you said, first off, I'm really passionate about the outdoors.
Yes.
And how did that passion lead you specifically to the kind of work that you do now? And how did you know that this is where you wanted to go with it?
Yeah, so in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I took classes in chemistry and in geology and microbiology. And in the end, I really enjoyed my macrobiology classes that focused on evolution and plant biology and wildlife. And I really enjoyed these classes because you got to go outside, you got to get dirty, very, very hands-on. And so pursuing a career in botany allows me to get outside every day, to just enjoy the areas that I love being, instead of being stuck inside of an office in front of a computer.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. You've made science fun.
Yes.
I love it. Well, we're going to wrap up here. I just want to wrap up with some positive feedback that your work is very impressive. And we think, Mary, thank you very much for talking with us and sharing some of your work as a scientist. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.